Greetings, my name is Mike and welcome to my Phoenix guide. So I've already made one of these, but that was quite a while ago actually, and quite a lot has changed since then, so I thought it would be a good idea to go ahead and make a new one. I've also created an in-game guide this time, so you can go and subscribe to that if you want to, so you can easily in-game see what abilities you should take and what items you should buy. I mostly did this because that's much easier to update when the hero changes. I mean, it's a lot of work to go and create a whole new video whenever the hero changes. So that's why I did that. Anyway, Phoenix is a ranged strength hero who can deal lots of magic damage to the enemy team. He can also slow their movement and attack speeds, and even heal up his own team at the same time, which is pretty powerful. He's actually one of my favorite heroes to play. I don't know, it's just kind of a unique hero, I guess, and quite difficult to play well. So I've played a lot of Phoenix over the last few years, and I just really enjoy him. And in my opinion, he's best played as a solo offlaner because he works well with more XP as compared to more gold. Next, I just want to go through each of his abilities, explain how they work and how you should use them. Just a quick thing to keep in mind though is that all three of his non-ultimate abilities actually cost HP to cast. So just keep that in mind and keep an eye on your HP in fights when casting spells. His first ability is called Icarus Dive, and it involves him just diving forward in an arc movement and ending up where he started. Any enemies that he passes over will take damage per second and have their movement speed slowed for a few seconds. Another cool thing about this ability is that you can cast it again mid-dive to stop the dive where you currently are. And also you can cast all spells and items normally while in the dive except for Sunray. So you don't have to stop it to cast your ultimate or to cast Fire Spirit, you can cast them while you're in the air flying around. So a value point of this ability is really powerful because in the early game while you're in lane, it's a very good tool to use to escape. Because the enemies are most likely going to be pressuring you, making your life difficult, so it's just a good tool to ensure that you can escape. In the early game, we should only ever use this to escape, and maybe to initiate, because it's got quite a long cooldown, so just keep that in mind. The second ability is called Fire Spirits, and when you cast it, it creates 4 Fire Spirits around you. You can then launch each one individually at the ground. Any enemies that are in the area when the Fire Spirit lands will take a lot of damage per second, and have their attack speed slowed significantly as well. Thing to keep in mind though is that if you spam all 4 Fire Spirits on one person at the same time, it doesn't stack, so please don't do that. You should try to put it on as many different enemies as possible. Also combos very well with the ultimate, but we'll get to that a bit later on. So this ability we're going to actually max out because it's very powerful. The attack speed slow and the damage are insanely strong, so we're going to max this ability out as soon as possible. In fights with this, you should just, as I mentioned, try and get it on as many different people as possible before using your ultimate. In the early game, in the laning stage, you can use this on the enemies to harass them. Maybe use it on the enemy carry to make it last hitting for them a bit tricky with the slowed attack speed. His third ability is called Sunray, and it's a channeled ability. While it's active, it makes a beam in front of Phoenix, which heals allies in the beam and damages enemies in the beam. Very important thing to keep in mind about this is that the damage and heal is based on a percentage of their maximum HP, which means this ability scales very well into the late game, so keep that in mind. It also gets more powerful for the longer you channel, so try to channel it for as long as possible. Also, while this is going on, you have a sub ability which allows you to toggle movement, so you can move forward while casting the beam, and you can also move over all terrain, which can allow you to escape some sticky situations. This ability is very powerful, but in the early game it's not as good as Fire Spirits, so we're gonna just take a value point and then max it out after we've maxed out Fire Spirits. And finally, Phoenix's ultimate ability is called Supernova, and when you activate it, you transform into a sun for 6 seconds. While that's going on, any nearby enemies take damage per second. The sun also takes a fixed number of attacks to destroy, 11 attacks on max level, so enemy heroes can hit that and try to kill it. If they manage to kill the sun, you just die like normal and you respawn like normal after a few seconds. However, if you survive for the 6 seconds, you'll stun any nearby enemies and come out of the sun with full HP, full mana, and your first 3 abilities off cooldown, which is pretty powerful. So as you may have guessed, this ability is a very good team fighting ability and also very disruptive. This is because if you cast it in the middle of the enemy team, they'll either want to kill it as soon as possible or leave the area to avoid getting stunned. So it basically just has a nice bit of crowd control there. Just be very careful when using this ability because if the enemy's attack speed isn't slowed or they're not stunned, they can kill it very quickly, just don't underestimate that. So make sure to put your Fire Spirits on as many different enemies as possible and then use your Supernova and it'll give them a very difficult time trying to kill it. You can also buy Aghanim Scepter to improve this ability, which allows you to cast Supernova on an allied hero, bringing them into the sun with you. And basically how this works is if it lasts for the full 6 seconds, you and your allied hero come out on full HP, full mana, with your first 3 abilities refreshed. Just be very careful that if they manage to kill the sun, you and your allied hero will die. And as for skilling your abilities, just get a value point of Icarus Dive and Sunray early on and max out the Fire Spirits. Once Fire Spirits are maxed out, you should max out the Sunray and then finally the Icarus Dive. And of course, skill your ultimate whenever you can. Next, I want to go over his talents quickly and sort of explain which ones I think you should take when. On level 10, he either gets plus 8% spell amplification or plus 90 GPM. Both these talents are quite enticing, but I would prefer the spell amplification since 8% is quite a lot and all our damage is actually from spells. However, if you're struggling to make any money, maybe you're not getting any last hits, you're not winning any fights, and the GPM can help you out there. On level 15, he either gets plus 40% XP gain or plus 60 Fire Spirit DPS. And both of these talents are very, very enticing. The 40% XP gain is very, very powerful, but the 60 Fire Spirit DPS is also insanely strong because currently at max level, the Fire Spirits will deal 70 damage per second. So taking that extra 60 is pretty much doubling it almost. So I'd recommend taking the 60 DPS because it's very strong. But the 40 XP gain is also nice if you're a bit behind and you need to get some levels. On level 20, he either gets plus 1 second Supernova stun duration or plus 1400 Icarus Dive range. Here I would prefer the Icarus Dive range because it literally doubles the range of the dive, which is really powerful. It gives you a whole lot more mobility to work with. But the stun duration can be nice if you have a team that can guarantee that you get the full Supernova off and there will be enemies nearby. For example, a Magnus or a Train Protector that keeps the enemies nearby. Then that stun duration can be very powerful as well. And for level 25, he either gets plus 2% max health Sunray damage or plus 3 Supernova hit count, and this one is actually very situational. It depends if the enemies are able to kill your Supernova or not. If you're able to get a successful Supernova off every time, then take the Sunray damage because Sunray is already a very powerful ability and making it more powerful is just even more scary for them. However, if you find that they constantly kill your Supernova and you can't really get anything done, then take the hit count, it can really help. Especially combined with Aghanim Scepter, which increases the hit count further. It just will pretty much ensure that you can get a Supernova off. And as you may have noticed, we don't really have any sort of reliable disable on Phoenix, so it works well with heroes on the team that do. For example, Puck and Faceless Void have ultimates that actually lock people down in an area, which ensures that we can get a good ultimate off. But my favorite is probably Train Protector because his ultimate stops enemies from attacking, which is just what we want here. So with Train Protector and Phoenix ult at the same time, the enemies can't really do anything and you just ensure that you get that good ultimate stun off. And since Phoenix is all about his spells, he's scared of enemies that have long silences like Night Stalker or Drow Ranger that can silence you and then just pick you off from there. Luckily we can buy items to help us out though, but of course we don't really want to if we don't have to. He's also not too good against enemies that can purge off the attack speed slow, such as Lifestealer, Legion Commander or Slark, because they can just get rid of the Fire Spirit slow and just kill your Supernova with no problem. Luckily though, we can buy Heaven's Halberd to help us out there, but still something we don't really want to do. Next, onto the item builds. For starting items, you should just get Tangos, Healing Salve, some Iron Branches, and then Windlace. Mostly because we're going to be going to the off lane, so it's going to suck because we're going to get harassed a lot, so we need some extra healing for that. I also like the Iron Branches because you can plant them and then eat them with the Tango for a bit of extra healing. And the Windlace just helps us out with some nice mobility, and we're going to build it into Tranquil Boots. And in the early game, you should finish up your Tranquil Boots, as I just mentioned. They're pretty much the perfect item for Phoenix here because, as you saw, all the spells actually cost HP to cast, and we're going to get harassed in the off lane, so they just help us to sustain ourselves so much more. And after that, you can finish up a Magic Wand if you want to, if the enemies have some spammers on their team. It can just help give you that extra boost of either mana or HP to either get a kill or to survive being killed. And finally, I want to encourage you to always carry Infused Raindrops in your inventory because it's just such a powerful item. I mean, they've saved my life countless times, so please just always carry Infused Raindrops. Even in the mid-late game, until you don't have space anymore, you should always be carrying some. And our first sort of core item that we want to go for is Veil of Discord, because all of our damage is actually magic, so amplifying it is actually really powerful. and also gives us some really nice stats that we like, except the agility, but whatever. So just be sure to put Veil of Discord down on them before you start doing anything. And from there you can either go one of two routes. If you don't have much disable on your team, you can actually get a Rod of Atos to lock the enemies down for 2 seconds at a time. This can also help you to hit your Fire Spirits and your Sunray, because they can be a bit tricky to land. However, if you've got quite a few disables on your team, then I would prefer a Shiva's Guard, because it gives us some nice slows, movement and attack speed slows on the enemies to stop them from getting away, and we also quite like the stats that it gives us. And as for the final core item, I would say Aghanim Scepter is pretty good, because it allows you to save an allied hero, as you saw earlier. However, I wouldn't say this is an every single game item, like I wouldn't rush this or anything, but it can be a very good pickup. If your core is constantly getting dueled, for example, by Legion Commander, Aghanim Scepter is really helpful because you can just bring them out of the duel and save them. I mean, imagine you're just about to kill that very scary enemy Phantom Assassin, but then the Phoenix just brings them into the Supernova and then she's full HP again. Not something you want to go up against, right? So this item is actually very powerful, but it just kind of depends on how the game is going. And for some situational items, as I mentioned, Phoenix is very scared of silence. So if they have any sort of silence, you'll need an item to help you break out of that. Probably the best solution here is Yule Scepter, because it's fairly cheapish and gives us some decent stats. Another option would be Lotus Orb, of course, but it's quite a lot more expensive. But the stats it gives are actually quite a bit better, and you can cast it on allies to get rid of silence on them. And if you find yourself constantly being burst down without even being able to use any spells, then Aeon Disc can really help you out here, because it gives you that 2.5 seconds of invulnerability to hopefully either dive out or to actually get some spells going on. And finally, I put Hand of Midas under situational, because it depends on how your lane is going and how the teams are made up. If you have a good lane and you're getting some nice money, you can rush your Hand of Midas to help you out with the XP problems, so you don't have to go for that XP talent. But it just depends on how you're doing in the lane. And finally, for some luxury items. Radiance is a pretty good item on Phoenix, because in the Supernova all auras still work. So you'll still be burning people with the Radiance and the Supernova for extra damage, and that gives them that mischance, so it makes it extra difficult to kill the Supernova. However, I wouldn't go for this item if you're not doing well, because it's quite expensive and can be quite difficult to actually save up for. So I'd say only get this if you're doing well in the game. Another good item, another good luxury item would be Octarine Core, because obviously it gives us shorter cooldowns, which we appreciate, and also gives us some very good spell lifesteal. Since we do a lot of spell damage, it can actually heal us up quite a lot. And Heart of Taras can also be a good item if you find yourself constantly being picked off before you can get any of your abilities off. It can just help you with that extra bit of survivability. And finally, I don't think I've ever done this though, Refresher Orb can be a nice item, because once you've just cast your Supernova, if somehow the fight is still going on, you can just cast another one. But I don't know how often you should actually get this item. And in the laning stage, you should just be quite chill, play quite carefully, because you're probably going to be outnumbered. So just try to get last hits if it's safe to do so, try and get as much XP as you can. If the enemies are being quite aggressive, you can try hide in the trees so that they can't find you, just to try and get some kind of XP. Also carry TPs at all times, because it's always good to go and help out your lanes if they're getting dived. You have quite a bit of damage, so you should be able to get some easy kills if your teammates need it. And in the mid and late game, just do normal DotA things, you know. Phoenix is a good team fighting hero, so go with a team. Maybe try to smoke up, get a pick off, then get some objectives. However, if you have a carry that needs a lot of farm, like an anti-mage or something, try to buy them as much space as possible. Maybe go 4 instead of 5 heroes, and go and gang and then push objectives. And if you find that your team is not really doing anything at the moment, maybe they're healing up or something like that, then just make sure you're always doing something. Maybe go into a lane if it's safe to do so and get some farm, or go into the jungle a bit and get some money there. Just be sure to always be doing something. And just for some general tips on Phoenix. I've probably mentioned some already, so I'll just go through them quickly. Icarus Dive is a great ability to have a value point in. It just gives you some good mobility and helps you to escape the lane early on. Only use this to escape or to initiate, because it's got quite a lengthy cooldown. And that's your only sort of escape that you've got. Fire Spirits allows you to slow the enemy's attack speeds a lot and deal a lot of damage as well. This is your main ability. You should cast this on as many different enemies as possible before using Supernova, so it's really difficult for them to actually kill you. Sunray, very powerful ability as well, which gets stronger the longer you channel it for. Also scales well into the late game because it damages based on a percentage of the HP, so don't underestimate this ability. Try to channel it for as long as possible to get the most possible heal and damage out of it. Supernova, very powerful team fighting ability, which allows you to disrupt team fights as well. Just be very careful when you use it on yourself or on an ally, because the enemies could kill it very quickly if they're not disabled or slowed or something like that. And I think that's all I've got to say, actually. Hope you've actually learned something and that you found something useful in this. Remember, I've created an in-game guide which you can check out and subscribe to if you want to and use in-game. I'll put a link below to that. Yeah, that's about all actually. Thanks for watching, hope you've enjoyed, and cheers for now.